Hello, this is for Social Work 539. What are you most afraid will happen to you as a result of taking this class? I'm afraid that I will not learn anything as I have a lot of experience in this area already. Um, what do you hope never happens in this class? I hope that no one ever says anything vaguely racist. Um, I've already had one instance in a class where someone said something that I felt was not quite right, and they did a lot of backpedaling and explaining, and then I was like, all right, fine, I give up. But I don't know. What do you wish from this class? I wish to learn something about social justice. I have a lot of social justice background, so I'm really curious what will add to my bevy of knowledge. What do you think of the purpose of class like this, and what do you think is possible to achieve in a class like this? Well, what I thought the purpose of this class was to learn more about social justice movements, which would have been what I would have taught if I were teaching it. But I'm not really sure what the purpose of this class is. We seem to be exploring diversity a lot, which is good. But I have a long background in diversity, so I'm not really sure. At this early date, what I'm going to get out of it. Um, What do you think is possible to achieve in a class like this? I'm hoping to study more social movements, more tools to advance social causes. There are multiple ways that people constitute their identities. If someone asks you what were the most important aspects of your identity, what would you say? That's a tough one. I would say social class. I wasn't always poor. When I was a younger child, my family was doing better for themselves, but then the Reagan administration took a lot of that away. Um, so I would say social class. I'm very conscious of my state in the universe, and how other people have more opportunities, and how I really have to struggle to get somewhere, which is why I'm going to grad school. Which groups and subcultures do you see as the most important sources of support and identification for you? Being biracial, it's kind of hard in that I feel kind of like in a category on my own. I meet sometimes I meet other biracial people, but generally I don't feel recognized as one of either group. I mean, I guess I kind of pass for being Caucasian. Most of the time, people just assume I'm Caucasian, or they assume I'm Asian, which I'm not at all Asian. African Americans generally, even when I tell them I'm African American, they're like, "You're not African American," so it's kind of hard. There's different aspects of the culture I think that I missed growing up in white suburbia when I was younger, and then by the time I did move to more African American neighborhoods, I was already seen as an outsider and kind of kept to myself. Even my family was kind of like, "You're the white kid," you know. Um, which identities groups arouse in you the greatest feelings of fear, curiosity, shame, and envy? Hmm. I don't know, rich people. I feel like they control aspects of my life by influencing Congress, and I don't really have any control over it. And at the same time, I'm envious of their position, although I do have strong socialist values and believe that everyone should share because we're all working and we're all producing this society, but people have unequal benefits from it. Um, Some of the categories of identity we will be exploring in this class include race, ethnicity, class, gender, identification, sexual orientation, age, ability, religion, national identity. Please describe your understanding of your membership in an affiliation with the above categories of identity. I don't understand what that means. My understanding of my membership. Well, being able to pass for Caucasian, I don't feel like my membership as being biracial has affected me. Sexual orientation, I don't know. I feel like that label is a misnomer and that everyone is on a scale, though I fall more towards the hetero end of the scale, so I feel like I don't really get affected by their age. I'm relatively young, but starting to leave my extended youth ability. I'm very conscious that I am able to do a wide variety of things and that some people are differently abled, and I'm very thankful for that. Religion is a tough one. I was raised Christian and still feel that I am relatively Christian, but I kind of follow my own path and don't seem to care about a lot of things that are representative as being cared about by the church. But there is strong social values and helping people that is associated with Christianity that I enjoy. How often do you think about these identities, and what do you think? It comes up from time to time when I don't agree with what I feel like is the dominant voice of society. And then I think more about like what my affiliations are and what um, next question. Which identities are a source of pride for you and why? Well, all of my identities are a source of pride for me. Why? They make me who I am. It's part of um, it's part of who makes me me, and without them, I wouldn't be me. So there. Which identities are a source of discomfort for you and why? Sometimes my poverty is a source of discomfort for as often as viewed as being your own fault, even though I struggled my entire life to get out of poverty and I'm still struggling. I don't think people who already have it good realize how hard it is if you're born into it to get out of it. And even though I wasn't born into it, I didn't have any control over, my family's descent into poverty. What aspect of identity do you struggle with the most and why? I guess that would be my biraciality. I don't feel like I identify with being white necessarily, even though I fit in most there because I'm just more generally accepted. Um, but then I get questions like, well, why are you walking black? And I'm like, I didn't think it was possible to walk black. I mean, I just walk the way I walk. And, or being called exotic, which I found very patronizing, even though the person mentioned it as a compliment. Um, what aspect of identity do you struggle with the most and why? I feel like I already answered that question. When were you first aware of yourself as a member of a particular racial or ethnic group? One of my earliest memories is being at Disneyland and getting lost briefly from my parents and going up to a security guard, and my my dad came back and heard me describing to the man that, well, my dad is tall and he's really dark and he's got a mustache And the guy was like, "Your dad is really dark," and I'm like, "Yeah, my dad is black," and he was just very confused. Um, Even though it was the '80s, which I think by that point it wouldn't be that weird. Oh fuck! I'm running out of power, and I'm cursing. But I don't feel like editing this video, so what I'm gonna do is plug this in while we're talking. So please just amuse yourself, take a break, relax, whatever. This is gonna be the worst video ever. Okay. Okay, so. Where was I? When were you first aware of people from races, ethnicities other than the racist ethnicities with which you identify? I don't know. Grew up in a very metropolitan area. I remember going to school and in San Francisco and passing Asian people doing Tai Chi every morning, and I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to join them, but I was always running late and never was able to. When was the first time you experienced the effects of racism? Well, personally, I feel like systemic racism affected me in that, my father wasn't really encouraged to go to school and didn't really apply himself. And I'm sure that affected us in a lot of ways. And then he in turn didn't encourage me to do anything. I just took it upon myself. He never encouraged me to go to college or really do anything. I was mostly encouraged by school itself because I liked school. But I remember moving to Oregon 6 years ago and being called a Jew because someone felt I was being stingy, and just trying to explain to the person that that was a racial slur and them being confused. And I was like, how could you be confused? That's obviously a racial slur. Even though I'm not Jewish, I was offended because I couldn't believe that this person had said that. Which racial or ethnic group do you feel you understand the least? I would say Arabs, because I don't know any and I've never really met any. And I feel like there's so much misinformation that I'm curious what's different from what I've been told. Who and what were the most important influences on your understanding of your racial ethnicity and identity? I guess I would say my family. I mean, it was hard when, you know, my African American side of the family said that I was white, so therefore I guess I wasn't part of the family. Let's see. How has racism influenced your ability to trust and be trusted by others and to form friendships and other relationships? I don't know. No, I don't know the answer there. What topics do you avoid discussing because you fear you will appear racist? I don't. I mean, feel free to discuss anything and know that I'm not immune to racial bias. I mean, I've seen people who, hate themselves and their own race. So, know that I'm not immune from that, and I'm always open to discussing something and just being, careful not to be offensive, like, you by like keeping an open mind and not being judgmental. Have you ever felt that you needed to master the spoken and unspoken cultural norms of a particular racial or ethnic group to which you did not belong in order to survive? No. How has racism impacted your ability to move culturally and geographically around the place you live? It has not. In what ways has racism affected your life and the lives of those with whom you are close? Um, well, like I said, my family, you hear stories about the police harassing them, and it's really hard because I never had those problems. In fact, it shows me racism because I've, been pulled over by the cops and then let go, even though I had committed an infraction. And then I hear other people who were just driving normally and did nothing wrong, and they were, manhandled and thrown in a police car only to be let go. What is your understanding of the difference between biological sex and gender identity? My understanding of the relationship is that sex is a biological distinction resulting from chromosomes, and gender identity is something that is entirely made up. I feel like it's something that should be done away with altogether. Um, People should be allowed to act however they feel comfortable. It's also different culturally in different places. When was the first time you were aware of boys and girls were treated differently because of their sex? What happened? I have no idea. I'm very aware of the glass ceiling and the pay gap, and that just makes me angry. I mean, I feel like if people do the same work, they should be paid the same amount. Should I feel like if people do the different work, they should be paid the same amount? Everyone should be paid the same amount. Everyone is valuable in some way. How did you learn to become the gender identity you have chosen to inhabit? Has there been a shift in your gender identity over the course of your life, and if so, what has shifted? That's the thing about learning gender identity. It's pretty much, automatic. You just are born into it. So I don't really remember choosing a gender. I do remember a shift, though, when I became an adult and hanging out with people who didn't view it as these static black and white roles, and they felt that people could take on different aspects of the feminine and the masculine, and I feel like that's a much more dynamic way to go about it. Have you ever been asked to identify whether you were a boy or a girl as a child, as an adult? When I was a child, as an adult, I grew a ponytail and was asked if I was female, even though I had no other feminine traits than long hair, and I thought that was very strange. Were you ever told that if you went out alone after dark, you would be raped? If yes, what was the implied identity of the rapist? No, I was never told that. I was told that I would be robbed, but that's different. How do you express your gender identity, and are there aspects of your gender identity that you would like to change? No, I feel pretty comfortable with my gender identity, and how do I express it? I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't know. Sexual orientation and expression. What did you learn about straight heterosexuality and other forms of sexual expression when you were a child? When you were in college? No. I'm in college right now, so let's see. When I was a child, I got the white picket fence heteronormative routine when I was a kid, and didn't really question that. When I was in college, or when I started college, many, many moons ago, um, yeah, I started to question it more, going, you know, it's like, But once again, I feel like I was just born into it, and you don't get a choice. You just are handed, some level of attraction to one sex or the other on the Kinsey scale. And what do you remember learning about people who were not heterosexual when you were a child? From what source did you learn this information? I learned that homosexuality was wrong in elementary school. With anything wrong was gay. Long since abandoned that thought. How, if you're straight, how did this information influence your ability to question your sexual orientation? And they made it really hard to question my sexual orientation, which I think everybody eventually does. They go, hey, maybe I'm somewhere else or someone else, but didn't really change. If you identify as gay, trans, or no, I don't. Okay, let's see. If you have ever acknowledged sexual attraction to a person of the gender with which you identify, what did that acknowledgement do to your understanding of your sexual orientation? It is kind of world-shattering to be attracted to the opposite sex because, is viewed by popular mainstream culture as being so wrong. But, I feel like people should just do whatever they feel like doing and not worry about what other people think about it. What do we gain and lose as a dominant culture by partitioning sexual orientation into categories of being an identity? And we lose a lot. I mean, people, I think, should be able to find love wherever they find it, and by confining people, I feel the same way about gender. We just confine people to these roles and, rather than letting them pursue whatever would make them happy. Have you ever modified your dress to signify your sexual orientation? Have you ever experimented with dressing in a way that challenges your sexual orientation? I've experimented with all forms of dress, even wearing dresses, and I found that it was amusing, but I wasn't really into it. But I do feel that people should be able to dress whatever way they feel like. What do you remember about your first encounter with your own, and others' disabilities? What feelings or thoughts did you have? I don't really think I have any disabilities. What feelings or thoughts did you have? I struggle with, feeling pity. I want to treat people as they, everyone equally. So when I see people with disabilities, unless they ask or are obviously in need of help, I just, treat them like everybody else. How do you define disability? I don't really know how to define disability. What feelings or thoughts did you wait? What physical and mental conditions do you exclude from the category of disability and why? I really like to let other people define themselves and not to define them for me or me for them. What has shifted in your understanding and composition of disabilities as you have aged? Well, I found a lot of people with disabilities that actually have much more active lifestyles than I do, and very full and varied lives. So that was surprising. What assumptions about independence, cognition, sexuality, and pain do you hold about individual disabilities? I think I just answered that. Kind of assumed that they, led sad lives, but, it's not necessarily true. If you do not identify as someone with a physical ability, are you aware of whether your dwelling, workplace, and school are accessible to people with physical disabilities? Meeting people with disabilities has made me aware that a lot of places are not geared toward that, and it's actually somewhat limiting, but I feel like Portland does a pretty good job of making things accessible. If you know, I don't know if what would change if you altered your conception of disability from that of a mental condition to instead a social construct? I don't know. How and when did you become aware of your class status? How did you feel about your class status? My class status has changed over time. I was born middle class and took a shift over time into extreme poverty. How did I feel about my class status? I didn't even notice my class status when I was, um, doing, moderately well, which I think most people who are doing well don't notice their class status. When I was in poverty, I definitely started noticing it, and it was shaming. It's even though there was nothing I could do about it, I felt ashamed to use food stamps. How would you define the term middle class? Middle class is someone who is not struggling to pay their bills, someone who has a house and a car and a decent job. Salary range would you attribute to middle class? God, I have no idea. What is a decent salary anymore? I've lived on so little for so long that I don't even know what a decent salary would be. What is the difference between class status and money? Well, class status is a I don't know. Well, class status is something you're born into and mostly retain. Studies have shown that if you're born into poverty, you generally are probably going to continue to be in poverty and bear your children in poverty. And if you were born into wealth, you're most likely to continue. So, I don't know, it's like a safety net. What images arise in your mind when you think of the term poverty? Oh God, children with flies on their mouths. I don't know. God, hunger, being skinny. How can you tell if someone's poor? Generally, if their clothes are dirty or older or worn. How can you tell if someone's rich? If they have really expensive clothes or drive an expensive car. What images arise in your mind when you think of the term rich? Pigs, mostly. If I had enough money, I would give a lot of it away. People with money are generally, actually, a study recently found that people with money have less empathy than people without money, which is kind of sad and interesting. What do we gain and lose in the U.S. by arguing that everyone, regardless of class origins, has the opportunity to become successful and move up the economic ladder? We are lying to keep people in a system of poverty that they can't escape from. We're all essentially trapped in a casino, and we can't escape playing the game, but the game's rigged. And that's America. Do you identify with those in your class bracket or with those above or below you? I identify with people in a higher class background because that's the way I was raised, one of my earliest memories, and because of my schooling. That's why I've always strived to get out of poverty. But I also identify with the working class and feel that things should be more fair. What are your first memories of someone you considered elderly? What kind of relationships do you have with them? Just my earliest memories of my grandmother, and I have a very good relationship with her. Although when I was younger, I didn't think of her as being elderly. Have you ever felt that aspects of your personality or interest didn't fit the numerical age you were at the time? How did this distance affect you? I've always felt that my interest didn't affect my age. As a child, I really liked the company of adults and talking about things that are above my age level. How does distance affect me? It kind of distanced me from other children. Would you feel comfortable having a boss who was younger than you? No, I would not feel comfortable with that. What is the appropriate age range between members of an adult romantic couple? How far is too far apart? Honestly, I think people should find someone within 5 years of their age. I think greater than that, you start to have too many differences, and your long-term feasibility is not very high. In about, I don't know, over 10 or 20 years, you start to get to the point where it's just an unequal power dynamic. Um, what are the differences between who older men and older women are perceived in the dominant white U.S. culture? Well, just look at George Clooney and Madonna. It's like George Clooney can go gray and comfortably grow old, or even what's his name, Kirk Douglas. But you know, women, they have to stay youthful looking, or they're, you know, have to hide themselves from the public. What are the differences between who older men and older women are perceived in the white dominant culture and the culture with which you identify? I feel like that's pretty much the same. What will you lose as you age? What will you gain? I feel like I will lose ability and gain knowledge. But hopefully I'll be able to retain a lot of ability. When was the last time you talked about race, class, ability, sexual orientation, or gender? I'm doing it right now. When and where did that occur? What did you say? What I'm saying right now? I mean, I'm always talking about it. I'm very interested in equality, and that comes up constantly in my conversations. Have you experienced internalized oppression? Well, does it show up for you? Sometimes I second guess myself. I don't think that I'm ever gonna escape poverty, but then I remember that I've already come so far. I'm the first person to be to graduate with a bachelor's, and the first person in my family to to get into a master's program. So I have to remember those successes. Have you ever been a member of a political coalition of diverse groups? What happened? How did it feel? I was briefly involved in Occupy. I kind of was disappointed with the media reaction to it, but was very happy with a lot of the successes that happened, which were, of course, downplayed in the media. Have you ever organized against a social injustice? Yes. How do you define power? Define power as the power to make other people do things that they do not want to do. Have you ever been worked in an organization that was entirely led by people of color? No. Have you ever been the only representative identity group in a social group or organization? What did that feel like? Sometimes I feel like I'm the only person of color in Portland, but since I don't feel like other people identify me as a person of color, it doesn't seem to affect me that much. But it comes up in subtle things. People say things that annoy me or that I feel like are insensitive. What feelings arose in you during this interview? None, really. What topics or questions made you uneasy? Oddly enough, the ones about disability. What topics increased your curiosity? None, really. What is the relevance of this interview to your practice as a social worker? I don't feel like it's really relevant. Have you ever talked about this? Well, I mean, subject matter is relevant. I just don't know that I have really brought up anything I haven't brought up before. Have you talked about this interview with anyone who isn't a social worker? No. The end.